G'day everyone, James here. In this video, I'm going to discuss with you the Excel object model and just talk about objects and methods and properties in general. This is a fundamental concept to understand, and it's key to working out how to manipulate Excel and make it do what you want to do. So if you can understand this concept of objects, methods, properties, and also events, but we're not going to really talk about events at this point in time, but if you can understand these concepts and understand how to navigate around to find out which objects have which methods and which properties and which objects have objects inside them and all of those, then you are really going to be able to pull Excel apart and really make it sing and dance and do what you want it to do. Okay, so let's get into this. And what we're going to do is I'm first going to talk about what an object is. All right, so an object is like, it's a thing, it's like a noun. So you are an object, all right? I am an object. A cat is an object, all right? A chair is an object. They're all objects, all right? And you can see that you can have objects could be made up of objects as well. So you are a person, all right? You are a human, but you also have a head, you have a body, you have a leg, all right? And your head is an object. And your head has a collection of eyes, and each of your eyes are objects. All right, so objects are things, they're like nouns, all right? And Excel has a lot of objects in it, which we'll see in a minute. A worksheet is an object. A cell is an object, although it's given the name of range, but a cell is an object, right? A window is an object. The ribbon is an object, all right? A pivot table is an object. A chart is an object. So the Excel is full of objects. Then objects have methods. Now, a method is like a doing word. It's something that you get the object to do, or something you do to the object. So you could have a human object and you could feed the object, all right? Or you could make the object run, all right? They're methods. All right? So, and a method is a doing thing, all right? So when you have a range, all right, which is an object in Excel, a range, you might select the range, right? That's something you do. You select it, all right? So methods are like verbs. And then you have properties, and a property's like an adjective, sort of. The analogy breaks down a little bit here, but a property is like a descriptor, all right? So if you have an eye has a colour, all right? So that colour is a property, all right? A cell has a value, all right? A sheet, a worksheet in Excel has a name. They're all properties, right? So you might have a head, and a head has some hair, right? Hair's an object, but the hair might have a hair style, right? It might be wavy or it might be straight, right? They're properties. And then the last one, events. As I said, we're not going to talk about events too much, but events are more like, it's sort of like a method that the object does. Right, so if you're a human and you eat too much food, you might burp, all right? So you're doing something, but you're not being told to do it. You just do it yourself, you burp, all right? And so there are events in Excel that we can use that we're not going to show in this video, but there are events like workbooks opening and cells changing and sheets changing. And so they're things, they're events that happen that you can do things on, right? But the main things we're going to look at as part of this video are the objects, methods, and properties. So to recap, objects are like the nouns, they're things. Methods are actions, they're doing things. You're doing something to the object, and a property is like a descriptor. Right? The other concept that's important is objects are in there might be objects inside objects. This is really going back to the descriptions that I said. So maybe this is, say we might have a person has a head, and then inside the head there's hair and there's eyes, and then so on down. All right, so there can be objects inside objects. Right, you have a workbook. A workbook has some worksheets in it. A worksheet has some cells in it. Right, and so on down. Right, and then this is the example of a method feeding the person, and an object. And an example of a property was the hairstyle is straight or wavy. The last important concept is that objects can be the same object, but they can be thought of as different types of objects. So, for example, you can have an animal object, but inside there are different types of animal objects. There are mammal objects, reptile objects, and bird objects. But they're all animals. But they might be a mammal type of animal. They might be a reptile type of animal. They might be a bird type of animal. And then if you look at a mammal, you might have a human. And a human is a type of mammal, but it's not like a dog, yeah? But they still have 4 limbs, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, right? They still have a mouth. They still have 2 eyes, right? And then James is a specific human. Right? So the same thing would apply in Excel, right? So in Excel, you have a workbook, but inside a workbook, you have sheets, right? So they're the sheets of a workbook. But some of those sheets might be worksheets, and some of those sheets might be chart sheets. So that's a little bit like the mammal and the reptile. But then inside worksheets, you can have a whole lot of different sheets. You can have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, and each of those sheets are like a sheet called James, a sheet called Mary, a sheet called Bill, a sheet called Fred. Right? And so this concept of you can have the same type of objects, but they're separate objects. Okay, let's now go across to Excel and VBA and have a look at the specific Excel objects. All right, so I'm across in Excel, and hopefully even just looking at Excel, you can see a bunch of objects on our screen already. All right, so you can see a sheet object. We've got sheet 1. You can see a cell. Right, now a cell is a special type of object. It's called a range. And even though one cell is a range, you might have multiple cells are also a range. A column is a range. A row is a range. But they're all objects as well. A sheet has columns. A sheet has rows. When I put in a shape in here, if I was to insert a shape here onto the page, if I insert a circle, that's an object. Right? And I can have shapes inside shapes. One interesting thing is when you see the ribbon up here and see all the commands on the ribbon, they're all objects too, but they're not actually objects of Excel. They're objects of Microsoft Office, because remember there are ribbons in Word and Excel and PowerPoint, so you get to those objects slightly differently. But in Excel, you have the various objects. So how do I know what all of the different objects are? Well, one easy way to find out what the objects are is to actually record yourself using a macro and see what the objects are. So let's just do that. I'm going to record a macro. I'm just going to call it objects. And you can see here I'm going to select a range. I'm going to put in some words. Press Control Enter to fill that. I'm going to select a column. And I might change the background color to yellow. And I select a row and change the font to red. All right. Let's insert a shape. and I'll put a circle here. Okay, so I've put in some objects onto my page. So now onto my sheet. So I'm going to stop recording now, and I'm going to go across and look at what got recorded. And I'm going to press Alt F11 to get up the code editor. All right. And if I go to modules and look at module 1, you can see that got recorded. All right. So you can see here, this is a range, and that's an object. And then I'm selecting it, so I'm doing something to it. So select is a method. Right? I've got the selection object here. I've got the selection object. All right, that's a range as well. All right, it's a range. It's a type of range object, and I'm looking at the property of this, and I'm putting in hello. All right, columns. That's a type of range object. And then I'm selecting that. So that's a method as well. Now, this is an example of an object inside an object. So I've got a range object, and I'm going to the interior. I'm going to the object which is the interior of that range object, and I'm setting properties, the pattern color index, the color, and so on. All right? Here, I'm getting the range objects, that's a selection, and I'm going to the font object inside it, and then I'm setting the properties of the color and the tint and shade. In this case here, I'm going to the active sheet, which is an object, and then I'm going to all of the shapes on that object. That's called a collection. I'm going to the collection of shapes on that object, and I'm adding a shape to it. And then here's some parameters of that shape. And then I'm going to apply a method to that and select that shape. So you see, this is a good example of where you're starting to see the objects. And you can play with the immediate window down here. So I'm going to say, this workbook. All right, so that's an object. This workbook dot name, and it's called book 1. All right, so this workbook is an object, and its name is a property. All right, and if I click on the dot here, and you can see the drop down, can you see that some of these look like green bricks being thrown, and some of them look like a hand holding a sheet of paper? All right, the green bricks being thrown are the methods, and the hand holding the sheet of paper are properties. All right. Let's have a look at how am I going to do it in the immediate window? We might have to do it here. If I have an object that is a worksheet here, so let's bring this down here, and I go dim WKS as worksheet. All right, so this is a worksheet. All right, so this sheet 1 here is a worksheet. All right, this is a very specific worksheet. It's worksheet sheet 1, but this is just the worksheet object because I haven't linked it up to any particular worksheet. But if I go WKS dot, you can see here I can activate the worksheet. I can go back up to the application. That's how you get to the command bars and things like that. I can calculate the worksheet. I can do all of these different things to the worksheet. Yeah? And you can see there are a bunch of properties and methods. So where do we see the list of all of those? The easy way to see the list of all of those and look at them is to use the object browser. So the object browser is F2, or this button here, and I can click on the object browser, and you can see here it's showing me all of the objects. All right, so these are all of the objects down here. All right, they're referred to as classes, but don't get concerned, they're objects. So if I search for worksheet down here, I should be able to find a worksheet object. All right, so here's a worksheet object, And then when I look across, I can see all of the properties, right? So a example of a property should be its name. If I go here, you can see I've got a worksheet.name. And then I've got methods, things that I can do to the worksheet. So for example, I could copy the worksheet, right? I could clear arrows if I'm displaying arrows for formulas. I could calculate the worksheet. They're all doing things that I can do to the worksheet. And then again, we're not going to go, but you can also see the events. So these are the things that the worksheet says, hey, I'm doing this at the moment. All right. So if the pivot table's changing, the worksheet's letting you change. And normally there would be, there would be events like before delete. All right. Activate. All right. So if I click on the sheet, it's activating. All right. Is a different thing. So you can see properties and methods. And this is very powerful. So recording the macro can show you some of the properties and methods. Going into the object browser can show you a lot of the objects and properties and methods and help you get through and code through that. So hopefully that's a really good overview on objects, properties and methods. So just to recap again, an object is like a noun. It's like a workbook. It's like a worksheet. It's like a chart sheet. It's like a window. All right? It's like a cell. It's like a column. All right? It's like a font inside a cell. You have a cell and then you have a font. All right? It's like a border style. All right? It's like the frame around an image or something like that. So there are objects everywhere in Excel, and knowing which objects are needed to do which things is part of the key in learning how to get the most out of Excel. So you've got objects, you've got methods of the doing things, I'm doing something to it. You've got properties, are like descriptors, like their color, their style, all right? And then you've also got events, which we'll cover at a later time. Okay, if you found that useful, please like and subscribe, and then look forward to the next video. Thank you.